Administration and troubleshooting. First part of this section is all about doing an RtWebParts backup. Like any large server-based application, we do recommend that you have some kind of a coherent backup and recovery plan. You got to coordinate it with at least your Pi system manager, because there are going to be things that need to be backed up from Pi, of course, with any other administrators doing backup. And then, of course, we do suggest you test the recovery at least once a year, and after you do upgrades. If you don't test the backup, well, if you don't try to restore it, you don't really know if you've got a good backup or not. So we do always recommend that people do try to do a restore, although of course it can be problematic to do that if you don't have some kind of a test system to work with, or the hardware to do a restore that doesn't involve your production system. But that's what we recommend. Now, in order to do an RtWebParts backup, well, since RtWebParts is in SharePoint, first place to start is to understand how the SharePoint backup works. And since SharePoint leverages SQL Server as its storage medium, basically it's an issue of backing up SQL Server. Now, you'll find more information about this at the sources you see on your screen there. Also, you will find in the RtWebParts administration guide, you'll find a section called Backup and Restore. Now, in that guide, you'll find that we recommend that you take a look at your SharePoint Central Administration to figure out which SQL Server databases are being used by SharePoint that need to be backed up. In fact, if you go into SharePoint Central Administration, now I brought this up by choosing Start, Administrative Tools, and then SharePoint 3.0 Central Administration. Once you go in there, from within that link, go to Operations. Within Operations, you'll find Perform a Backup. When you choose this, you'll see a list of, it's about 7 different databases. That's one place you can go for information about what gets backed up, what part of SQL Server, what databases within SQL Server are being used by SharePoint. As you can see, though, this is also a great way to do the backup. So again, the way we got into this, Start menu, this is under Administrative Tools. This is SharePoint Central Administration. And from within there, we need to choose the Operations link. And that's how we get to the backup. Now, in addition to backing up SharePoint using the traditional tools, or the standard tools, you'll also have to back up certain specific things that are not part of the SQL Server backup. In other words, if you simply do the SharePoint backup, that's not enough. So what you need to also back up is, well, first of all, the RT baseline configuration information. That's stuff like the data sets and the table and trend configurations. That's backed up in the module database. And the backup of the module database is part of the backup of the regular Pi server. So that's why we suggest you coordinate this with the Pi system manager if you are not he. And then finally, any customization of style sheets, themes, web parts, etc., those things are going to be stored in a Windows file folder. You have to make sure you're making that part of your backup as well.